So today I'd like to revisit a few of the shapes that we've already worked on, like these starfish, but do them with a new and different stitch, a slightly more complicated stitch. For this starfish, what I'm doing here, I started out by creating a fly stitch with a long tail, and then I came up beside that fly stitch and went through that section in the middle and then came back out. So it's like two fly stitches back to back, and it creates 5 spokes. And then I came up in the middle, and now essentially what I'm doing is a back stitch around those spokes. So the way that that back stitch works is that you come up and then you go back around the spoke and then go underneath the spoke and then underneath the next one. I'm just working on the top layer. I'm not going through the cloth. Wherever you are, you go back underneath the spoke and then underneath the next one as well. So wherever you are, you go backwards underneath that spoke and then forwards underneath the next one. So each time you're going under 2 spokes. You go back under one and then under the next one. And you just keep going around and around and around in a circle. And what that does is it creates this really kind of nubbly-like texture that reminds me of the center part of the starfish, but then you've got these radiating legs coming out as well. I just recently learned this stitch and it felt so much like a starfish that I knew that I wanted to use this in my piece here. Now, if these stitches feel too complicated for you, please don't feel you need to do them. And you can absolutely do these stitches in the water or up on land. And I don't actually know what the stitch is called. I'll put it on the screen when I'll figure it out and put it on the screen. And then when I feel like the center part of my starfish is big enough, I just choose one of the spokes wherever I am and I wrap the thread around it a few times. Again, I'm just working on the top layer. I'm not going through the cloth. I'm just wrapping my thread around one spoke at a time, and I'll do that 2 or 3 times, and when I feel like that leg is done, I will go through the cloth and then move underneath the cloth to the next spoke. So now I'm just going around the spokes. I'm not moving on top off the cloth between the spokes. I'm just going around the spokes on the top, and I quite like this way of creating starfish. I think it's a really neat, nifty thing. So I'm going to create a few more starfish like this, and then let's see how things look. And now the next shape that I want to revisit are these oysters. I really want to use the stitch that's called the oyster stitch, and I've had to practice this. Now I've got this really nifty variegated thread that's shades of gray and black that I think will be really fun for this stitch. And I'm going to use 2 strands, and you probably could just use 1 strand of gray and 1 strand of black. But what I did with my variegated thread is I put one in one direction and one in the other direction, so I've got both colors going on all the time. So the way that this oyster stitch works is, so you start out by creating a cross chain stitch. You come up on your cloth, and instead of going back into the same hole, you go back into your cloth a little bit of ways and forward. And then you come up inside the loop just as you would for a regular chain stitch. And then what you do is you go back through that first arm off your stitch, and then create a regular chain stitch right over top of the same space. And when you're making this stitch, make sure that you come up inside the loop of that first twisted chain stitch so that all of the threads get secured properly. This is a little bit of a complicated stitch, and absolutely, if you don't want to do this, don't feel that you need to. Let me do that again. So I come up on my cloth, I go back down a little ways away, and we'd use this first part of the stitch to create little fish back in January. And then you come up in between just as you would with a normal chain stitch. But instead of taking the securing stitch right away, you take your needle down underneath that first leg off the chain stitch. Now that top part there is a little bit unstable, so you want to just be very delicate with it. You make a loop with your thread and then you go back in to your cloth where you first came up, and then you do a regular chain stitch, but make sure you come up inside the loop of that first chain stitch, and then you just secure it off at the end, if that makes sense. So I'll do a few more of those and you can follow along if you like. And again, this is a stitch that you may not feel like you want to do because it is really fiddly. And if you're not an experienced hand stitcher, embroiderer, this may be a little bit more than you want to take on, and you absolutely don't need to do it. I just really wanted to learn how to do this stitch. I've been practicing all year to be able to do it because it's called the oyster stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and add lots of oyster stitches here. And now, if, like I said, if you don't want to do them, and they could absolutely be underwater as well, but if you don't want to do them, then doing 2 chain stitches over top of each other is perfectly good. And this is how this end of my scroll looks right now. Once again, thanks for watching and happy stitching. See you again soon. Bye for now.